I think part of our civic engagement should be mandatory voting. I think voting should be compulsory. How do you feel about that?
Um, what's your argument?
In countries where voting is compulsory, people are much more.
We'll take the House in the next 3 months. Please don't tempt me with a good time. Get some impeachments going. Mega based. I don't know if you can impeach somebody. I wonder if you could impeach Donald Trump for violation of the 14th Amendment because he shouldn't be in office. I wonder. Didn't think you would respond to fact, bring it, denier? Listen, the request is open. If you want to come up and talk, I'm here. Morgan, how's it going?
Good. I was just typing in the comments. How are you?
Not too great.
Oh, I guess that makes sense, right?
Yep. That's okay though.
Well, I was gonna say they can. I just hopped in just to say this. Pretty much, they can impeach him for that. But the thing they should impeach him for, that I think is a stronger case, is setting up an illegal federal department with the type of powers that it has.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I believe that. I just didn't know.
A constitutional crisis at that point.
Yeah, I just didn't know. Okay, so I didn't know because what you impeach somebody on is like high crimes and misdemeanors or whatever. But I didn't know if like him being sworn into office despite, the I word. I didn't know if that was if that technically counted as a high crime or a misdemeanor. I could see like usurping congressional power as one though, so that would make sense.
I was gonna say, well, the thing about the 14th Amendment is he can try, but once he's tried and the courts say no, like at that point it's not a crime yet. But if he kept trying to do it, then it would be a crime. Like he said, nope, this is what we're doing. This is the law. Get over it.
Could you not argue that he already kind of has done that though? Because with the say again, sorry.
I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, it seems like you're knowledgeable on this, but I believe the court struck his 14th Amendment plan down, and so now that they've done that, that is the decision. And so if he were to go away from that decision that the courts have already said, then I believe that is a crime. But I don't know if they would count it as a high crime compared to other high crimes in the past, like Watergate, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I think the department thing is more.
So the thing that I would so the 14th Amendment would just be the birthright citizenship thing. I think once the courts strike that down, it's just done. But with like the usurping of congressional power, are you familiar with like the OMB memo, which was like freezing all of the federal funding?
I believe so. I don't know the details, but I heard about it.
So basically, they just put a memo out, basically saying that all federal funding is frozen right now. And then a judge came in and said, like, hey, that's not a power that you possess, so we're going to freeze this memo because you cannot freeze federal funding. And then the Trump campaign basically said, oh, you froze the memo, so we're going to rescind the memo, but we still are going to freeze all the funding anyway. And like, you could maybe argue that that in itself is defying a judge's order because we all knew like what the judge was ordering. But it's kind of it's tough to tell.
He has the power as the president to do things like that temporarily, and so it really just depends on how it unfolds. But he has undeniably committed a crime with the Doge situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like that's they should write articles of impeachment.
But I believe that the OMB there are certain powers that allow like a definite freeze, so a freeze within like 45 days or something like that. I think that's the limit. But the OMB freeze was basically indefinite, which I believe is illegal. Like I don't think the executive has the authority to indefinitely freeze executive funds.
No. It depends on where the funds are coming from. If those funds were not authorized by Congress, then yes, he can freeze them indefinitely.
Yeah,
but if they were authorized by Congress, then he cannot, and he can only hold temporary pauses on them.
I may be wrong, but isn't all of the funding that goes to federal agencies done by allocation
It's
from Congress?
from the House. Yes, the House holds the power of the purse, but the president does have the authority to create like interim like committees and departments and
Yeah, sure.
stuff like that. But they're limited in their power. And so once he has created departments that are overreaching their power, then you can begin to build a case to his criminality to it.
But I believe that the funding, I think that the funding that the OMB memo affected wasn't like departments or anything. It was like federal agencies, like the EPA or the USAID or like congressionally created federal agencies, which I don't think he's allowed to do.
No. If that's I haven't read it, like I said, but if that is the case, then yeah, he can't do that. Well, he can, and he will. You have to remember, like every lever of accountability has been leveraged against this dude. Like, I believe if he just straight up started abolishing federal agencies, I don't think anything would happen to him. I think everybody would go, okay, we'll fix it in 4 years. 2 years.
Well, I mean, so there's a lawsuit happening right now. It's basically like a union of federal workers, and they sued Donald Trump and Rubio and the State Department and USAID for effectively dissolving the agency. So I don't think nothing would happen.
Well, I mean, you have to understand. I don't think that any lawsuit like that leads to like a president's conviction. It would take
sure.
Congress, or to even to hold the administration accountable in any way, or the Republican Party anyway.
Gotcha.
Like, nothing's going to happen to the man because it will take a Republican Congress to impeach him. And I think if they are able to hold both their House and their Senate, I think from 2026 to 2028, they will start holding him accountable because they have elections that they have to run. And at that point, most people will hate this man and they have to compete against him. He can't run again. They can't run with him at the top of the ballot again. So they're going to have to build a real case for electing them. And so I think by 2026, you'll start seeing Republicans more willing to sign on to stuff like that. But ultimately, like, they're so deep into the bag of Donald Trump at this point that, like, if they were to turn around and be like, okay, we have to impeach him for doing exactly what he promised us and we encouraged during his election. I mean, I don't think any of them are willing to stand up for, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but it's just not going to happen. I mean, you have to remember, Democrats impeached the dude twice for completely valid things and nothing happened. Like,
the second one almost went through. It was just procedural grounds. But
yeah, I mean, he's president now.
Yeah.
So,
fuck the 14th Amendment. It happens.
Fuck this country, honestly, but whatever.
Hey, I'm a patriot. I like the country. I just don't like people gaming the system. I want to build a more perfect union and not destroy it. That's my main incentive.
I think that there's some destruction that needs to happen for it to be the country we want it to be.
Destruction.
I think the one thing.
Destruction. So when I say destruction, I mean like illegal destruction, not just like big reform. If you believe in illegal destruction, don't Fed post. But
well, that is what they're framing what they're doing as, is like they can set up these temporary things as a way of restructuring the executive branch. And that's how they're getting away with the USA thing, all that. But no, I mean like we should like rewrite the Constitution at some point. We have the oldest Constitution in the world. It is falling behind. Our people are living under what is essentially the first generation of human rights, like speech. Most of the world has moved on from that. Most constitutions include things like the right to a job, the right to a clean environment. So that's what I mean. I mean, calling a constitutional convention and having them rewrite it.
I don't know if I would trust anybody to rewrite the Constitution at this point. I feel like a lot of work needs to be done to the Republican Party before they touch anything regarding. Because I agree, like I have criticism of the Constitution. I think we allocate way too much power to the president. And like, obviously the thing like a guarantee to a healthy environment, but it seems like all of that could be solved by the amendment process if we just made it like maybe just making the amendment process a little less stringent.
Sure. But I would like to see the governors at some point come together and seriously consider rewriting the Constitution. And I think right now would be a bad time, but I think it has to be done at some point. Because there just clearly is no real lever of protection to protect us from what is essentially fascism, authoritarianism.
Yeah.
There's no lever of power to protect us from that. So I think it kind of requires us to reconsider that entire document. To let us hear,
I'd have to I'd have to some harsh consideration to think about that, but
Yeah.
regardless, whenever that time comes where it'd be appropriate to rewrite the Constitution, it's like tens of years from now.
I mean, I would like to see it, and it's not going to happen. But 2028, if Democrats win, I want to see them try. If they win some more governor's races, I'd like to see them try. Yeah, it's just a very flawed system we have. I always ask people, I'm like, have you read the Constitution by chance?
Yeah.
Okay. I usually ask people that, and when they're like, no, I'm like, okay, well, it's 4 pages. I recommend
Yeah, but it's
reading
like dense as fuck though. Like there's definitely some sections that I don't understand.
It's very short. The U.S. Constitution is very short, and the reason we have so many issues is because the Constitution isn't clear on stuff. Like the Supreme Court can make the rulings they make because the Constitution just doesn't say anything about them. Like if they were to try and impeach Trump and the Supreme Court overturns it, like there's no lever to hold them accountable. Stuff like that.
Does the Supreme Court have the authority to overturn an impeachment?
Well, they can say it's illegal. That doesn't meet the standards of a high crime or misdemeanor.
I don't think the Supreme Court has any say on that. I feel like once both houses convict the president, I think that's just the process done. I don't even think I don't even know if there's an appeals process to an impeachment.
Oh.
I mean, there might be, but I can't imagine that there would be an appeals process for an impeachment. Just because it doesn't work as the same as almost any criminal trial.
One sec, I'm looking into it. I believe that they have some lever there that they can say, like, this is illegal, it doesn't meet the standard of a high crime or misdemeanor.
Someone says impeachment is political, Supreme Court is legal. But I mean, like, at the same time, impeachment is, like, kind of faux legal. Because it's technically called a trial, it's technically called a conviction.
Right. It's a political process.
I agree, but I mean, like, it kind of
right.
like cosplays as a legal process. So I don't know if it would be like if it would be granted the same powers as a legal process. I would imagine no, because the idea of presidential appointees bailing out the president who is convicted in Congress feels like also not like something that we would do. I mean, maybe.
No, I think you're right. I don't think they intervene at all. And it's for what the person in the comments was saying. That's a political question.
If he hasn't been stopped already, he won't be stopped. Well, yeah, I reject that he hasn't been stopped. I feel like the judicial has been holding him relatively to account.
He's the president, and they dropped all of his federal charges.
Yeah,
like,
okay, but I'm talking about like like specifically within his action with like Doge and with like the freezing of U.S. aid. Like I feel like the judicial has been more or less holding him to account for his actions as president. Now with the impeachment stuff and the January 6th stuff, I think that was absolutely despicable. Absolutely, and I think
they're not really holding him accountable. But they're just saying what you're doing is illegal.
No, it would be putting a freeze on. It would be putting a freeze on the actions. So like it's not. They're not just saying this is illegal. They're saying this is illegal and you cannot do it.
Yeah, I mean they told the same thing to Barack Obama when he tried to like redo the immigration laws in this country via executive order.
Yeah, sure.
But that's not like holding him accountable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't even necessarily know if you should be held to account necessarily for doing something that is technically unconstitutional, other than just that action being paused.
I seriously believe,
unless it's like an insurrection or a high crime. Yeah.
Well, I think I would. I think the lever of power here should be that there's a presumption of like guiltiness for a president, and then the merit is on them to prove that they're not guilty. I think that's a better way to do that. Like I think Donald Trump should be in prison following his
Absolutely.
last
Absolutely.
presidency. But that's what accountability looks like to me. Not being able to walk around and keep spewing your shit.
I agree, and
So no,
to be clear, I think he
accountable.
absolutely evaded accountability prior to being elected. But when I'm talking about like our checks and balances keeping him in check just within his presidency, I don't think that like we're necessarily like I don't think we're necessarily seeing the collapse of our republic or anything. I don't even necessarily think we're seeing the system gamed in a way that
We definitely are, brother. You just set up a bunch of federal departments that like are illegal shit. Like that's a constitutional crisis right there alone.
we could argue whether or not we're in a constitutional crisis, but I don't necessarily think that means the end of our republic. I think the two strongest arguments that you would get me is that the voters are compromised and they're no longer willing to check tyrannical activity, and I would say yeah, probably. Or the Supreme Court is compromised in that, like, once you appeal to the highest law of the land, they're basically going to bail Donald Trump out. So there needs to be huge Supreme Court reform. And I'd say, yeah, probably. But at the same time, I don't think that necessarily means that we should throw out our entire, like, system of governance. I just think that it needs reformed. We need to make it a more perfect.
Well, I don't. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying throw out the whole entire system of governance. I'm saying rewrite the Constitution, but which is something governments do all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Like really all the time. No, I mean there just should be like real accountability in scenarios like this. Like I don't come from the legal world, I come from the political world. But
sure.
Like the fact that our legal system and the current, political system we do have leads so much to authoritarianism, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. This is a different scenario. But nevertheless, most of our presidents are slightly authoritarians. And now we have one who is trying to completely consolidate power into the presidency, into the executive. Yeah, that's a constitutional issue, to me,
Sure.
at least.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd meet you in saying that our presidents naturally lean towards authoritarianism. I guess in a way, but
I said our legal system, our political system gives way to authoritarians. Like if you're an authoritarian, you're a populist, you're much more likely to get elected in the United States than somebody who is not.
yeah, sure. But then the problem would be probably necessarily with democracy and not necessarily our system, unless you're talking about throwing out democracy, in which case I'm probably just absolutely opposed to that.
Well, no, and you don't do that either. But you also don't, like you were saying, like, okay, maybe our voters are compromised. The way power is set up in the United States, you have businesses, corporations, then you have the government, and then you have the people. They give it like a triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And what they tell you in like political science school is think about those things and think about the percentage of power each of them has. Everybody might think, okay, split it equally. Government has 33%, businesses have 33%, and the people have 33%. In the United States, it's more like 70% for the businesses, 20% for the government, and about 10% for the people. That's how power is organized in the United States. And so it's less of a us problem and more of a we need like better structures to prevent corporations from having so much power. Trump was elected.
I don't even know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Okay. I mean,
I we need to dig way deeper on it, but
we'll just go to campaign finance websites. Like
campaign yeah, but
the
the problem is that I don't think necessarily donations from corporations means that the candidate is bought. I think corporations are generally going to donate to politicians that already more or less meet their agenda. And I don't think corporate influence was the thing that got Donald Trump elected. I think just populist rhetoric was the thing that got Donald Trump elected, and inflation.
What state are you in?
I need you to explain the relevance before I answer that question, because I'm really
I won't make you answer that. Is there more or less than 5 million people in your state?
More.
Like significantly more? Are you in California, New York?
Oh wait, hold on. I might be stupid. Roughly 10 million.
10 million. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, think of like a smaller state like Alabama, West Virginia, Louisiana, right? Do you think that all of the people in Alabama combined have the same amount of power, political power, institutional power that Walmart has?
No, absolutely not.
So 4 million people do not have the same power that the Walton family does?
Okay, I think I see our disagreement. But so my disagreement was the 70%. You said what, like 70%? And I'm not holding you specifically to these numbers, but
no,
like,
I said that, and I stand by it. It is. I would say it's about 70%.
yeah, but I'm not going to say like, what if it's like 75%? Like, I'm not going to hold you hardcore to these numbers.
Oh, got you. I stand by 70%.
Yeah, but like 70% business, like 20% government, and 10% voters. You said.
Yeah, about.
I would probably take away from the business. I would say that government and business probably have about equal power, and the people still have about 10% power. I just think that the government has more power than business.
Following 2010, do you think that's still the case? I would have said that before 2010. But,
what's the relevance of 2010?
Are you on a computer?
Yeah.
Look up Citizens United versus the
Citizens United. Yeah. Okay. I figured that's where you were going. I need to read about that case. I know that there's a lot of nuances that I'm not prepared to answer to.
No, you're fine. What that court case did, it was a right-wing think tank that sued the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, because they wanted to donate unlimited amount. They said that money is speech, that we should be allowed to donate unlimited amounts of money to political candidates. And the Supreme Court ruled with them. And so that's the current situation we're living under.
Yeah, sure.
So again, I would agree with you before 2010, but after 2010, like there's a reason that 4 million people don't have the same power as the Walton family. Well, the Walton family is 4 billionaires.
Honestly, like on Citizens United, I'd probably just have to defer to your opinion until I do more research, because I'm not equipped to have a conversation about Citizens United. That's about all it comes down to.
Well, I will say that's fair, and I will say for me that is the reason Trump was elected, and I would say that's a big reason why Biden was elected. Like when we talk about like political power, I'm saying like there's no protection for us for the most part if the Bezos family decide to come into Alabama and buy up most of the open space that was for sale.
Mm-hmm.
That means that people like you and me now cannot buy that space and build a house.
Sure.
But also the government is not going to check him because the government has contracts with Amazon. The government has contracts with Google and Microsoft. They rely on each other in a lot of ways, but the government is also beholden to them in a lot of ways. They can't just like switch from their Amazon Web Services. Like there's not a lot of alternatives for the federal government. So in a lot of ways, they are beholden to them. And if you are running against somebody who gets $10 million from, I don't know, Raytheon, and you're trying to fund crowdsource money from like your neighbors, it's hard. I'm not saying you can't win. And Kamala Harris kind of proved that like if you have $1 billion, you still can't win. But nevertheless, you're less likely to win. We are a democracy. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. We're a democracy in the way that if you get enough people to sign your petition or whatever is required in your state to run, you can be on the ballot. But 90% of the time, I'm going to put my money with the person.
For like advertising, yeah, that's absolutely important. Yeah, I'd never say that money plays or business plays absolutely no role in politics. I'd never say that. But I would say, and it sucks because I have nothing to cite except for like vibes, basically. But it doesn't feel like I don't feel like business has the same influence over or like the same level of influence over politics that you do. But again, like most of that's just going to be based off of things that I haven't done my reading into.
No, you're fine. I'm not going to hold you to that either. But I say Citizens United. That is the number one thing you should read.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of stuff about Citizens United. Yeah.
But I would say literally before you develop any new political opinions, you should read Citizens United. They said money is speech. You and me know that's not the case, but if somebody has $1 billion and there's 170 million voters, we're outspeeched. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's the situation we're living under. And to me, yes, that is how Donald Trump got elected. His campaign finance stuff is public information. If he did not have the money he had and the reach he had, I don't know that he would be in the situation he is. Like, yeah, I don't think he'd be president.
I'd probably disagree there.
He was able to effectively be a populist because he had the money to spread propaganda, and they did well. I'm not saying like, oh, the Democrats had a great, option, but it was a significantly better option, and it was like the baseline option.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's just how these people get elected. Trump himself is a billionaire. It's the only reason he's able to run to begin with. He self-funded the first time, for the most part. Like, you and me can't just pick up and decide to run for government.
Sure,
we don't have the money to do it. He could. He did. He went 70 years of his life never having done a single bit of public service. And he woke up one day and said, I have the money to be president. Not I have the votes. Not I have the support.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I have the money to be president. So he ran, and then he got the support. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is mostly just a conversation I'm not prepared to have. I mean, I'm like, obviously, I'm taking your points into consideration. I just haven't, like, I try not to comment on anything that I haven't done a lot of reading into.
Oh yeah, that was me with the thing you were talking about earlier. I had no idea.
Yeah, sure.
But,
yeah. But yeah. Are you on This is gonna be a super cringe question. I'm so sorry. Are you on Discord?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Okay. I'm trying to let me sell for a second. I'm trying to build a community a little bit where I'm basically just trying to keep everybody like super factually consistent, super factually grounded. And I'm trying to keep myself that way. And I'm just trying to really promote that amongst everybody that I talk to. And most of the people that I have in my circle are not very knowledgeable on civics, all due respect to anybody watching, and B, I assume not as far left as you are, or at least has like that's a guess. I don't know if you're super far left, but like wouldn't have knowledge on like the interactions between business and politics. So
I'm not super far left. I work in the government, but I work in legislative politics. But yeah, Citizens United, that's the one to read. But I hear you. Got to keep your people consistent.
Well, not only that, but like I think it would be important to have someone like you around, just because it's a kind of viewpoint I don't have represented in the people that I talk to regularly. And this is like the best conversation I've had with almost anybody on TikTok ever. So, because most of it's just like, that's such a hard question.
Would you vote Democrat? That's a better question.
I vote Democrat, yes, but I wouldn't. I'd consider I mostly consider myself a libertarian. I care about my country. I'm a patriot. I am socially liberal, just because I feel like a lot of the Republican Party is super racist and super transphobic, and I don't understand why.
Yeah.
It's none of my business.
Okay.
And but most of the stuff that I talk about revolves around like civics and like I talk a lot about January 6th because I think that should have been like, that's a uniquely disqualifying thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with somebody who's a felon or somebody who is in prison running for any office. My problem with Trump's crimes are the specific crimes.
Yeah, the nature of those crimes.
The nature of those crimes is corrupt. Falsifying business records, being held liable for assault, like those are very nefarious. So that's my issue with that. We've had people run from prison before. I believe in the 20s or 30s, we had a communist run from prison. Could be wrong on that decade, but early 20th century. But yeah, teaching people civics is great, really important. I think part of our civic engagement should be mandatory voting. I think voting should be compulsory. How do you feel about that?
What's your argument?
In countries where voting is compulsory, people are much more engaged in the political process and much more invested because now they go, okay, I'm forced to vote. I might as well vote for the right people or the people I believe in. And countries that do that, Australia is the big one. Um, their government is moving more liberal than it was. I would put it on that. Um, so I think the American people should be forced to engage civically. Voting should not be a choice; it should be a responsibility.
And then when we're talking about like forced, like what kind of mechanism would you hold people to voting?
Yeah, yeah. If you can physically get up, drive your car, and go and vote, or go and walk and vote, you should be hammered on it. For you, they should let people vote a lot earlier. Our elections should be a lot shorter, and if you don't vote, um, they should they should fine you. There should be some kind of small mechanism. Like if you don't vote, here's a $25 fine. Okay,
Okay.
we're gonna send you a ballot. Okay, here's your ballot in the mail. You didn't send it in. Here's another $25 fine.
Yeah, I'd be open to something like that. Like the reason I was asking is like if we're looking at a country where we're like jailing people who don't vote, I'd be like, okay, probably not.
No,
But like if we're just talking
no.
about like minor fines if you like ignore multiple opportunities to vote, I'd probably be okay with that.
Well, yeah, and if it's mandatory, we'd probably get the day off. A lot more people who, are maybe disabled or seniors who don't always get the opportunity to go and make sure they get their ballot in.
Mhm.
Those systems would be forced to be set up because now it's everyone's responsibility to go vote. Um, so everybody's voice would be heard. And so many people cannot go and do that. People are working, people are disabled, people are literally just incapable of being able to go and vote
Sure.
because their state didn't mail them a ballot. Um, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So they didn't request a ballot, like if you're in some deep southern states or in some states in the Midwest. So I think it should be compulsory, not voluntary. Everybody should be forced to some extent to participate in the system.
Yeah, I could probably get behind that. At the very least, because I'd imagine that's like a pretty politically unpopular idea. At the very least, like making voting day a national holiday, I would absolutely 1000% agree with. And I think Kamala Harris was supporting a piece of legislation that would do that, but it didn't get through.
Democrats have run that a few times over the decades, but the problem with that is that voting is voluntary.
Yeah.
You have a right if you're on the job to like go vote and then come back. That is your right. But most people don't want to lose out on an hour of work, 2 hours of wages.
Mhm.
So no, it should be a paid federal holiday, and everybody should be told they have to go vote.
Yeah, even if we weren't looking at like mandatory, like the state like mandating voting, I would still absolutely 1000% support any piece of legislation that puts that forward. Well, not any, but almost any piece of legislation that would put that forward.
Yeah. I mean, I would make a safety clause at the end of it. I would make sure that it can't be petitioned.
Mhm.
I make sure that it happens. And I wouldn't leave that up to the states. Most election law is up to the states. This one I would put in the hands of the FEC, or another federal agency, and they should make everyone vote. If you don't vote, then yeah, you should be fined, or some other kind of mechanism that forces people to vote.
So when you're looking at like rewriting the Constitution,
That's one of the things I would put.
yeah, I was gonna say like what would your major incentives be to do that? Like what would you like want to happen the most when it comes to doing that?
Well, that's a big one, I will say.
Yeah.
An expansion of our. So, do you know what I mean when I say the first generation of human rights?
No.
Okay, so I believe there's 3 generations. We're currently in the 3rd generation of human rights. And you can look them up, and it's just how people have interpreted human rights over time. In 1776, they interpreted it as free speech, freedom of the press, some very basic rights that Americans hold pretty close to themselves. The right to weapons is not one of them,
Yeah, sure.
but you can throw it in there
Uh-huh.
if you'd like. We're now in the 21st century, and it should be expanded.
Okay, yeah, sure. Expanded to things you said like the right to a safe environment, the right to
The right to a job.
yeah, the right to a job.
Yeah, that should be a constitutional right. Um, and it is in some countries. The third generation of human rights deals with a lot of things that are collective, solidarity rights, like the right to development, the right to a healthy environment, the right to peace. What else? Self determination. That's what those rights deal with.
And
The second generation.
if I look up third generation of human rights, like there's going to be stuff that comes up, I assume.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
you know,
cool.
this is something they.
I didn't know if this was something that was
Generally,
researched or if this was like a personal.
no, this is from a textbook called uh, I don't remember what it's called, but it's a real thing. This is something political scientists deal with.
Okay. I'm taking notes, by the way. I have stuff to look into. um,
Yeah, just look up the concept of generations of human rights. It puts rights into like distinct groups
mhm.
that reflect like I said, over time, like a historical development of like evolving priorities, in like recognizing human dignity. And so, first generation, civil, political rights, right to life, right to speech, religion, bartering or like fair trade. What else? Hmm.
You know, I mean, if you like, you don't have to go down through like super extensive detail because I'm going to
Okay, yeah,
look all this up on my own. Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question, but I think I may know your answer. Um,
Oh, what's up?
so when I bring up the problem of like I think the voters are compromised, and that they're not willing to check like tyrannical activity anymore, um, what like are there any ideas that you think would meaningfully address that? But I think your answer is going to be businesses involvement in politics,
In
and
what
like
way?
reforming that. But
In what way?
I don't know. um,
Hmm.
so do what you want with that question, I guess. The main question is like what do you think we do if our voters are compromised in like checking tyrannical activity or like illegal
Well,
activity?
I guess my problem with the question is I don't believe the voters are compromised. I believe the voters are uninformed. Sure. And my solution to that is one, make it compulsory to vote.
Sure. Yeah. Hmm.
But also, if we were to, start enacting laws and stuff, the separation of powers and the equality of those powers needs to be like really hammered in because these things are up for debate. They always have been, always will be,
Hmm.
and we got to cut that debate out. Um, Things like judicial overrides, like in Alabama, for example, most people who are sentenced to capital punishment are not sentenced by a jury, they're sentenced by a judge who overrides a jury that said they should get life. Um, and then it's just like basic stuff like protecting our elections, upholding the rule of law. You
Um,
know what I mean?
yeah. So I
We could
guess
decentralize, I guess. You know,
when I say that voters are compromised,
yeah,
there's and I fully acknowledge that I could just be like a like selection biasing my problem because like most of those people I talk to are insane. But I don't know if that's like an accurate representation of the standard like Republican voter or whatever. But it seems like voters are really open to authoritarianism in a way that I've never seen before in my life, and
yeah.
are not only uninformed about what like kind of threat Donald Trump is, but even when they are informed of the threat that he is, they are almost fine with waving away their rights because it's Donald Trump and because in the name of like government efficiency, because like dictatorship is an objectively more effective or like more efficient way of running a government, but you like hand over all of your human rights away to an autocrat. Um, so it seems like a lot of voters are willing to hand over their rights like in the name of government efficiency. So when I say like voters are compromised, I mean like it seems like not only are they uninformed, but they're also way more open to tyranny than than they used to be.
Well, that is like these people thinking that okay, this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what like solidarity is. this isn't really the voters being compromised. This isn't really a problem with even our education system. This is people seeing Trump as an individual and going, he will save us. Um, and I would argue too, like honestly, we have seen this before. Under Reagan, Reagan tried to abolish the Department of Education. He just went through Congress and Congress said no. A Republican Congress didn't even make it out of committee. But I'll tell you, like, as someone who's run statewide campaigns, local campaigns, mayoral campaigns,
Mhm.
I'll tell you, like, voters are a lot more like people are not as crazy as they are on the internet.
Okay.
Like,
So
the
it
internet
probably
is
okay.
a
Yeah.
really bad example of like I've canvassed before. I've canvassed thousands of doors, if not 10,000 doors,
Mhm.
knocking on people's doors and talking to them directly. People are not that crazy. Like people get it for the most part, but in the sanctity of their own home with their own thoughts, yeah, they're gonna think someone like Donald Trump is good if they are, fit a certain demographic or are wealthy enough, or think that, it's just what we're talking about is people lying. Donald Trump's a liar, but that's not new. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
people fall for lying all the time. You know,
I would.
so I don't think
I,
that means our voters are like
I w-
irreparably like compromised.
Yeah,
You know?
sure. I would push back a little bit in the sense that, okay, so if Reagan was pushing to get rid of the Department of Education by doing it through Congress, well, that's the legal route to get rid of the Department of Education. That would be following the law. And I mean, it's stupid,
Yeah, but
it's
people
harmful, but
elected
it's
him.
legal.
People elected him to do that. You know what I mean?
Sure, but now we're
following a period of recession.
but I would
Following the
I would
period of okay.
I would argue that it's different from what we're seeing right now because people basically like we knew that Donald Trump was a criminal. We knew that he was fine with traversing the law, and breaking it when it's convenient.
Yeah.
We knew that he was planning on like letting Elon Musk do all of this. We knew that it was illegal, and the people voted for it anyway. I feel like that is a meaningful distinction.
I think that I'll tell you two things. To look at the American population and think that our voters are any different than the voters in France or the voters in Germany or the voters in Mexico or Canada, I think that's just a fundamental misunderstanding. These countries all have their same people. You know, like half the population of France was ready to elect Le Pen, who is essentially a Nazi.
Mhm.
And I don't say that lightly or as a moralizing statement. It's a definition. If
Sure.
you look into her beliefs.
And I've also seen a lot of people like compare Trump's rising through U.S. democracy to like Orban's rising through Hungarian, or through Hungary.
Sure. Bolsonaro, another good one. But like the rise of authoritarians is not necessarily a question of the voters. It's a question of like people's material situations. Like in the 30s in Germany, people were struggling. People across the board were struggling financially following the decades after World War II. I mean, after World War One. If you look at the situation in who else has an authoritarian? And Hungary, fine. Like they went through a period of economic decline. The United States, we just elected Trump because we're coming out of a period of economic decline.
Sure. Yeah. You can look at Germany.
People are. I think Germany is. They would have gone down the same path, except Elon just came in, and so they might not win now.
Oh, I mean,
But,
like Germany, like the 1930s Germany.
But the solution to that, like Mexico has elected authoritarians before, but the solution to that and why Claudia Sheinbaum, the current president of Mexico, was able to stave off what happened to the rest of the world, because the United States was not the only country to like go full throttle into this stuff. But what they did is that party is like they believe in universal systems, so they presented an alternative. Biden did not present an alternative. Schultz did not provide an alternative in Germany, and so here we are. They did not provide universal systems in the same way that Mexico was promising, and so their liberal parties lost. So it's less of a question of are the people not willing to stand up to this, and more so, why don't we have these mechanisms in place
Sure.
that
Yeah.
prevent these things already, like universal systems?
Well, the thing is that we did have these systems in which it would theoretically check somebody like Donald Trump coming into office, but not only like did the people not check it by voting him in, but also the Supreme Court's basically sucking Donald Trump's dick. I don't think anybody was expecting the immunity ruling to come down, because it would have like unraveled everything, and it did.
Yeah. Well, here's one example. if this country, and don't get me wrong, there are 46 countries that do this and they have their own issues. But if the United States, if Kamala Harris would come out and said, actually, she's a bad example. If 20 years ago this country had established a universal healthcare system, had they added into the Constitution, healthcare, the right to healthcare is a right of an American citizen or somebody residing in the United States. If that was the law, we would be living under at least one universal system that is not qualified welfare. It would be at least one thing that every person in this country has access to, can unite under, whether it's in the protection of or trying to abolish it, is one thing that we can all unite under, is one thing that we all benefit from, it's one thing that we all need to protect, just like Social Security or Medicaid. Those are uniting issues, you know?
Sure.
Right-wing people who are senior citizens, they don't want Social Security cut. They don't want Medicaid cut. They rely on those programs to survive, and their checks are not big. Their checks are very small, and they are living paycheck to paycheck with these Social Security checks. So when they turn around and go, okay, I'm going to vote for Trump, it's because they're living in poverty. They're struggling. But if we had universal systems in place, like these rights to a job, these rights to healthcare, those are the type of mechanisms, and Mexico just proved it, that prevent authoritarianism. And so when our liberal party does not present real alternatives to dismantling all of our systems, then they lose, and people don't believe in them, and people don't believe that they are capable of governance. But that's not more of a question of the parties than it is a question of the voters. We have political parties so that we don't have to look into every candidate. We can go, okay, this is the party platform. I'm going to elect the person who's on that platform. That's why we have parties. But the parties are not they're in their actual governance over the last 50 years. They're incredibly similar, and neither of those things have led to the type of universal systems that prevent authoritarianism. And so that's what I'm saying when I talk about the Constitution, that if we are think about the Second Amendment, that's a uniting issue for a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people don't believe in it, whatever. But you go to the Republicans, they all believe in that. They're like, hell fucking yeah, because this is something we all get to enjoy. This is something we all have access to. If you're mad that I have a gun, well, you can go get a gun. And so, love it or hate it, that's a uniting issue for people. Medicare is a uniting issue for people. And it's because they're big government provisions that allow people to own something or allow people to get something. And when Democrats are running on, okay, well, I'm going to just keep things normal. And then the Republicans are running on, we're going to fundamentally change the country. Which one do you think is going to play better with people? That's not people being stupid or willing to let in criminals into their government. That's people saying, we're screwed. We're all poor. We don't have the education we need. We don't have the, infrastructure we need. Democrats are promising the same old. Okay, Republicans got my vote. So it's less of a question of us and more of a question of our choices.
So then my problem's probably just going to be that it doesn't seem like candidates that promise the same kind of change that Republicans do can get a lot of popular support, but it doesn't seem so. For instance, I may be wrong. It doesn't really seem like universal healthcare has a super polls super popularly.
It polls super popularly. Look at Pew Research. Look up Pew Research. Should everybody have the right to universal healthcare? The Sanders campaign did their own independent research because the research didn't exist before 2016. Every country that has universal healthcare systems, they live longer and they all unite under it. Conservative governments around the world don't, for the most part, say, oh, we're going to get rid of our universal healthcare system because it's a popular thing. When when England had their elections, Boris Johnson, I don't know if you remember him, he resigned. When he ran, he's a conservative Tory, and he would put, as a conservative, as the most conservative, he would put all over the city buses, we're sending $300 billion to whatever country, let's put that into the healthcare system. I forgot what it's called, but and he won that way. As a conservative, you can look up the photos of the buses in England. That's how he won. Is he promised universal systems, and when liberal parties don't uphold that, then there's a space for somebody to come in and try to privatize it. And that's not really uniting, but it's an alternative when people think it's not working. Um, when people are like, "Oh, the government's not working, the government's not working," it's like, well, the government is working, but like it's just not working for you, and that's not really a voter issue. That's a party issue.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I could probably meet you there.
I mean, the fact that every country that has a universal healthcare system has a higher average lifespan than the United
Yeah,
States, except
I
for
mean,
like two of them.
yeah, and don't get me wrong.
Like that's uniting.
Yeah,
That's a uniting thing.
I more. I mean, again, I haven't done my research, so I wouldn't. I don't have like a high degree of confidence, but I would say that I probably support universal healthcare. And you're right in that it. So the latest polling I'm seeing is 57% of people support it.
And that's a low number. Is the truth that's a low number. If you look at some of the other polling, it's higher. Gravis Institute did one. Um, it's usually like the high numbers are like 68, right below 70.
But
That's the high numbers, and 57 is the low number. So it's in that range.
I guess my problem is that, or not my problem.
Yeah.
The disconnect was that when I said not popular, I more so meant like it is. It does still seem like a partisan issue. So it may be popular amongst the majority of voters, but the majority of voters probably
look at. Well, this goes back to my conversation. The main thing about politics is power, and so that's why I brought up the 70-30, the 70-20-10 thing before, because if 57% of the country agrees that this thing should happen and it's feasible to do, who's holding it back? Oh, that's right, the special interest of the hospitals, the pharmaceutical companies, the device companies. That's who holds it back.
Could you not say that the thing that's also holding it back is like the way that our government is structured? So like it seems like
I would say that
if like 50 some yeah, well yeah, but I'm saying okay, so like if 57% of people believe that universal healthcare oh boy, sorry, my TikTok live just does that. I'm sorry. If 57% of people say that they support universal healthcare, it's probably going to run into the same problem that that the Electoral College does, in that but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a problem with business running the government. It's more so a problem of like, well, we just look at representation amongst the states differently. It's not necessarily done on how popular an issue is. It's how popular an issue is amongst like these set places, and like Republican districts I don't think would swing for universal healthcare, and I don't feel like it would have like a likely chance of getting pushed through the system.
There's a reason that a Bernie Sanders had a lot more Republican support than a Joe Biden. I think the fundamental reason is that Bernie Sanders promised universal systems and Joe Biden promised qualified welfare. Like I said, in other countries as well, conservatives don't run on dismantling their universal healthcare systems. In 46 countries that do it, they don't run on that because it's unpopular. In the United States, if we had those systems, people would not run against them because it would be unpopular. That's why when Trump talks about privatizing Social Security, he used to talk about it. He used to talk about privatizing Medicare, but you don't hear them talking about that a lot anymore. He didn't talk about it during this election either.
That's kind of
unpopular.
That's kind of true, but at the same time, Donald Trump was running on repealing the Affordable Care Act, at least in 2016.
No, he switched. Yeah, and he didn't talk about it a lot in 2024. He switched to migrants are the problem for just about everything, because he understood that if he was going to get the senior vote, he could not come to the systems that they live on. Not saying he won't do it.
Sure, but he wouldn't run on it. But in 2016 he ran on it and he won. But maybe that's just an issue of Hillary Clinton, or
the issue. No, she won the popular vote. She was more popular. But the problem is that we just went through a time of economic downturn. Coming out of the Obama administration, we were up. So people are willing to do things depending on the time. But Donald Trump was just elected not for those reasons, but because he promised change. Again.
Sure, yeah.
But in 2016, yeah, he could run on that in 2016. In 2024, you will seldom find very many clips of him talking about it because he knew it was unpopular. They know the Republicans know it's unpopular. But why would they privatize Social Security or Medicare, even if it's unpopular?
Sure, yeah.
No, that's a question. I'm asking, like, why would they do that if it's unpopular?
Um, why would they do that if it's unpopular?
Yeah, why would they privatize Social Security?
I don't know. Probably just because it would benefit businesses to privatize it. But
Yeah, there would be corporations set up, and they would probably buy investments and stocks in those companies and watch it skyrocket. Just like they've done
is
with.
he trying to privatize? Is he trying to do that?
I'm saying he is trying to do it, but he didn't run on it because he's
Yeah,
unpopular.
sure, but I haven't seen him be trying to do that.
You don't think so?
It's possible that I just haven't seen it. I've been more so focusing on like hyper specific other stuff, so it's possible that slipped my radar. But
the Republicans, since Medicare's inception, since Social Security's inception, they have been trying to privatize it. That has been the goal for 60 years. Almost every Republican who is currently elected, you can find a clip of them if they've been in government for at least 10 years, at least, saying that they want to defund these systems. Donald Trump included, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
That's them not talking to you and me. That's them talking to the head of United Healthcare or the head of Pfizer. That's who they're talking to when they say that. They're not talking to you and me. They got to appeal to their stakeholders who write their legislation, who organize their legislation, who come to the Capitol and say, here, we'll distribute this to everyone. We'll go office to office and make sure everybody sees your bill about defunding Medicare. I mean, there's a reason we don't have a universal healthcare system, that we have not joined every comparable OECD nation in that. There's a reason for that. And it's our billionaires are much richer than other people's billionaires. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd have to think. That's the kind of thing that I
mean,
on
its surface, 46 countries that have conservative and liberal parties, 46 countries have been able to do it at a cheaper cost. And this is just one example of a universal system, but nevertheless, all these countries do it. Why does the United States not? It's popular among the people. And the only reason it's a bipartisan issue is because there's a caucus of Democrats in the federal government and locally who don't take money from corporations. There are plenty of Democrats who do, and they don't support universal health care.
Well, it does seem like universal health care is a partisan issue.
But here's the thing: it is a partisan issue to the politicians.
No,
even then, there's still a right in the Democratic Party. Half the party says it should happen.
Even the
half the party says it doesn't.
Even the so I looked up the Gallup polling. It said this, so like 88% of people say that it's of Democrats say that it's the government's responsibility, whereas 28% of Republicans say it's the government's responsibility. So that would be like a that would be like a so this is amongst like the people as well.
Equal. There are more. Those numbers aren't equal, though. There are more Democrats in this country. So as a collective, most people support this.
Sure, but then we're looking at the allocation of political power within Congress, and it's I feel like there needs to be more work done to fully convince me that this isn't just due to the way the system is set up and not necessarily the influences within the system.
I think if you are truly on a mission to learn why that is, I would say our billionaires are richer, our corporations are richer, and they have more influence than in other governments because other governments protect their people against the power of corporations.
Yeah, and I absolutely wouldn't argue
I'm
that.
Not trying to, I'm not trying to like demonize businesses. That's like my parents are small business owners. Like I'm not trying to come for
I understand
businesses. I want us to be rich. I want us to thrive, but nevertheless, these things don't exist because corporations have a say in it.
Yeah,
corporations are people.
I don't.
According to your government, corporations are people.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'd have to stew over. But listen, it's been nice talking. I'm tired. I hope that I talk to you again in the future. You are really knowledgeable. This is probably the best conversation I've had on TikTok. I appreciate you coming up a lot.
Well, one last thing. If we don't talk again,
sure.
if you are truly on a mission to find out why these things don't exist in America, and all the opinion polls say it's popular, most people, you go door to door and they say it's popular, and then it doesn't happen. Almost nothing the American people support is what passes Congress. So I would say if you're truly on a mission to learn why that is, campaign finance is public information in every state and federally, and you can look at who takes pharmaceutical money and how they vote. Their votes are also public. You can compare the two and figure it out. You know what I mean? So
sure.
I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, sure. It's been good talking.
Yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, you too. What a guy. That was really nice. That probably just bought TikTok like 2 more lives for me. Because every time I end a live, I'm on the brink of getting rid of this fucking dog shit app. But at least I can have conversations like that. All right, well, I appreciate everybody stopping by. On YouTube, I'm actually ending this time. But okay. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate Minnesotan for paroling the chat. I really appreciate that. And yeah, good conversation. Also, wait, before I get off, I do want to say one thing. Like I said at the beginning, it wouldn't surprise me if financial interest matched voting records, but not because the financial interest is influencing the voting records, but because financial interest usually chases somebody that already aligns with their views. That would be my guess. I have to read, but it was good. It was good. It was a good conversation. Okay, I love everybody. Okay, bye.